All right, so we're diving deep into hybrid working today. It's a model that's really changing the future of work. And we're going to be looking at it using this handbook designed for European SMEs. These are the folks who are really in the thick of navigating this new landscape. And I think it's safe to say hybrid work is here to stay. It's not just a pandemic fad, it's growing rapidly. And today we're going to uncover some surprising benefits. And probably some challenges too, right? We'll even look at some real world examples, companies that are actually making it work out there.
Yeah. You know what's so fascinating about this is it really is like a work revolution. When you look at the numbers in the EU,
Yeah.
the number of people working from home, it more than doubled during the pandemic. It jumped from 5.5% to 12.3%. And here's the thing, that number kept rising even after the pandemic ended. It hit 13.5% in 2021. So it seems like it really is something that people want, not just something they were forced into.
Yeah. It seems like people are really enjoying having more control over their work lives. But what about the impact on companies, though? Is all this flexibility actually leading to better results?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. We're not just talking about happier employees. There's increased productivity
Hmm.
and better employee retention, too. Like there was this Stanford study. It found that remote workers were 13% more productive. And a lot of that was due to fewer distractions. People were able to focus more.
Makes sense. Less time commuting means more time to actually focus on work.
Exactly. And studies show that leads to a better work-life balance. And we know that means people are less stressed and more likely to stay in their jobs.
It's like everyone suddenly got the gift of time back. All those hours lost in traffic are now theirs to spend with family or hobbies, or even just taking a walk and clearing their heads. So happier workers are more productive workers. But what about the companies themselves? What's the benefit to them beyond, having happy and productive employees?
Well, for one thing, reduced commute times mean lower carbon emissions. And that's helping businesses meet those sustainability goals. Yeah, those are pretty important these days. Plus, think about the talent pool companies can tap into now. They're not limited by geography anymore. They can find the best person for the job, no matter where they live.
Wow, yeah, that's a huge shift. Seems like a win-win for both sides. But we have to be realistic too, right? There must be some downsides. Like, how do we make sure that remote workers don't feel isolated or left out of opportunities?
Yeah, that's a really critical point, and the handbook actually addresses that head on.
Hmm.
Companies need to be proactive, like ensuring remote workers have the same access to information and resources as their in-office colleagues, scheduling regular video calls, using those shared online workspaces, maybe even assigning dedicated mentors. These things can all help.
It sounds like communication is key. But what about this productivity paranoia I keep hearing about? You're saying remote workers can be more productive, but I'm guessing a lot of managers aren't quite convinced.
Yeah, it's true. The handbook actually talks about this clash between how managers perceive productivity and how employees experience it. Imagine you're a manager used to seeing everyone at their desks. Now your team is remote. You can't physically see them working. It's natural to feel a little anxious, right? Even if 80% of employees say they're just as or even more productive at home, this lack of trust can lead to micromanagement. And that ends up damaging the flexibility. You know, that flexibility that makes hybrid work so appealing in the first place.
Right, it's like a vicious cycle. Distrust leads to micromanagement. That leads to unhappy employees, which then probably does lead to decreased productivity. It's a mess. So how do we break that cycle? How do we build trust in a hybrid work environment?
Well, it's all about shifting from a culture of control to a culture of trust. We need to move away from measuring face time and focus on results instead. Think clear communication, setting realistic expectations, and providing the right tools for remote collaboration.
Can you give an example of what that looks like in practice?
Sure, companies like Buffer and GitLab, they've successfully embraced trust-based management. They empower their employees and focus on outcomes rather than hours worked. And they've seen incredible results, both in productivity and employee satisfaction.
That's inspiring, but it's not just about trust though, right? There are some practical concerns that can make or break a hybrid working model. Like, not everyone has the ideal home setup for productive work. I'm picturing cramped apartments, noisy roommates, kids running around. Not exactly a recipe for focused work.
You're right, the handbook acknowledges these real-world challenges, and it talks about companies needing to provide flexibility in terms of resources, like offering stipends for home office equipment, access to co-working spaces, or even redesigning office spaces to cater to a more diverse set of needs.
So it's about adapting to the individual, not forcing everyone into a one-size-fits-all solution. And it sounds like the physical office itself is going to have to change too.
It definitely is. The traditional office is undergoing a major transformation. We're moving away from those rows of desks towards flexible spaces that cater to different work styles and needs. Think hot desking areas, quiet zones for focused work, spaces designed for brainstorming sessions or team projects.
So we're not just ditching offices altogether.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
We're seeing this trend called the hub and spoke model, where companies are moving away from giant headquarters towards smaller local offices, closer to where people actually live. So instead of everyone battling a long commute into the city center, they could have a shorter trip to a local office a couple of days a week and then work from home the rest of the time.
It's all about finding that balance, right? Providing spaces for in-person connection and collaboration, while still offering the flexibility of remote work. But with all this time spent online, how do we avoid digital exhaustion and burnout? I think we've all experienced the joy of accidentally leaving our mic on during a video call.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Zoom fatigue is a real thing. And the always-on culture can lead to book out quickly if it's not managed carefully. So the handbook emphasizes the importance of establishing clear communication protocols and encouraging healthy digital habits, like setting guidelines for after-hours emails, promoting regular breaks from technology, and even training managers to be mindful of meeting overload.
So it's about creating a culture where it's okay to disconnect and recharge, even when work can theoretically be accessed at any time. But that all comes back to trust, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. A successful hybrid work model requires a fundamental shift in how we think about work and management, and the relationship between employers and employees.
And the handbook provides some real-world examples of companies that are successfully navigating this transition right. I'd love to hear about them.
Yeah, I'm all ears. Give me the good, the bad, and the ugly of hybrid work so you can all learn what works and what to avoid. Okay, let's start with a success story. The handbook features this company called the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, FSCS for short. They're based in London, about 240 employees. And what's interesting is they embraced full flexibility back in 2019, well before the pandemic hit.
Wow, so they were ahead of the curve. What made them decide to go all in on flexibility so early on?
Well, they seemed to really get that flexibility was a huge benefit for both their employees and the company itself. They developed this your day, your way approach.
Right.
Basically, it means employees have complete control over when and where they work.
Okay, but how does that actually work in practice? Doesn't it just lead to chaos if everyone's just doing their own thing?
Well, that's where trust comes in. And clear communication is essential. FSCS invested in the right technology. They redesigned their office spaces to include things like hot desking areas and collaborative spaces. And most importantly, they trained their managers to lead in a way that supports this flexible model.
So it's not just about saying, okay, everyone work whenever you want. It's about putting the right structures in place to make it actually work. What kind of results did they see?
Well, they saw increased employee satisfaction and improved productivity. They were even able to reduce their office space, which saves them money.
That's fantastic. Sounds like a win-win all around. But I'm guessing not every company has had such a smooth transition. What about some of the not-so-successful transitions? What can we learn from them?
You're right, not every company has found it easy. The handbook also includes a case study of a company called Fideris Partners, another London-based firm, about 22 employees. They actually had a remote-friendly work culture even before the pandemic, but they still struggled with communication and collaboration when they moved to a fully hybrid model.
Interesting. So even if a company is already comfortable with remote work, transitioning to a fully hybrid model can still present new challenges.
Absolutely. Fideris Partners found that those informal interactions and spontaneous collaborations, you know, the kind that happen naturally in an office environment, those were harder to replicate in a hybrid setting.
Yeah, I can see that. It's one thing to have scheduled meetings, but what about those quick chats at the coffee machine? Or bouncing ideas off a colleague in the hallway? Those little interactions can spark some amazing ideas.
Exactly. Those serendipitous interactions can be crucial for creativity and problem solving. So Fideris Partners realized the value of both physical and remote options, and they focused on bridging that gap. They invested in virtual communication training for their managers, and they emphasized the importance of regular check-ins and team-building activities, even if they were done virtually.
So it's about adapting the way we communicate and finding creative ways to connect, even when we're not physically in the same space.
Precisely. And this highlights a key takeaway from all these case studies. Technology is essential for making hybrid work successful. But it's not enough on its own. You need the right culture and communication strategies in place too.
Right, it's not just about having the latest video conferencing software or project management tools. It's about how you use those tools and the overall culture of communication within the company.
Did the handbook have any examples of companies that successfully use technology to, make hybrid work work?
Actually, yes. It features two companies, Plenty Markets and Integrated Environmental Solutions. They both successfully use this platform called Officer ND Hybrid to manage their transition. Plenty Markets is a German company, about 250 employees. And Integrated Environmental Solutions has offices in Glasgow and Dublin, total of 272 employees.
So these are companies of different sizes and different industries,
Hmm.
but both facing similar challenges. What did this platform actually do to help them?
Well, for one, it helped them optimize their office space. Remember how we talked about the physical office evolving? Well, this platform helps companies figure out how to use their space best, whether it's through hot desking, creating collaborative areas, or even just tracking occupancy to see what's working and what's not. So it's like a data-driven approach to office design, using technology to make sure every square foot is being used effectively.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just space planning. The platform also helps companies schedule collaboration. So teams can plan when it makes sense to be in the office together. And that way they maximize those in-person interactions.
That's smart. No more showing up at the office, only to find that half your team is working from home that day.
Exactly. And finally, the platform allows companies to gather feedback from their employees about their hybrid work experiences, which is so important, to make sure the model is working for everyone. It's about creating a continuous feedback loop to address any challenges and make adjustments as needed.
It sounds like this platform is a great example of how technology can be used, not just to facilitate hybrid work, but to actually enhance it and make it more successful. But even with the best technology, we still need that fundamental shift in mindset, right?
Absolutely. A successful hybrid work model ultimately comes down to embracing flexibility, building trust, and finding new ways to connect and collaborate.
So how do we actually make that happen? What are some concrete steps that companies and individuals can take to make this mindset shift a reality? So how do we make that happen? What are some concrete steps that companies and individuals can take to make this mindset shift a reality?
Well, for companies, I think it starts with moving away from that old school mentality, that FaceTime equals productivity thing, and embracing a more flexible, results-oriented approach. They need to trust their employees to manage their own time and workloads effectively. And that requires a shift in leadership styles.
It sounds like managers need to let go of the reins a bit and focus on empowering their teams rather than micromanaging them.
Exactly. It's about setting clear goals, providing the right resources, and then trusting employees to get the job done. The handbook actually has some great advice for managers, the ones who are navigating this transition. It really emphasizes the importance of clear communication, regular feedback, and creating a culture where it's safe to ask for help or raise concerns.
So it's not just about giving employees more freedom, it's about creating an environment where they feel supported and connected, even if they're not physically in the same space. But how do you maintain those informal connections and those spontaneous collaborations? Those are so important for team morale and innovation when everyone's not in the office all the time.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Mhm.
The handbook suggests a few strategies, like encouraging virtual coffee breaks,
Yeah.
using online platforms for social interaction, and even planning in-person team-building activities on a regular basis.
So it's about being intentional about creating opportunities for connection, both online and offline. It can't just be all business all the time. You need to make time for those water cooler moments, even in a hybrid world.
Exactly. Hybrid work requires a more thoughtful approach to building and maintaining relationships within teams. It's not something that just happens organically, like it might in a traditional office setting.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive into the world of hybrid working. We've covered the benefits, the challenges, and even some real-world examples of how companies are making it work. As we wrap up, is there a final takeaway you want our listeners to remember about this hybrid work revolution?
I think the key takeaway here is that hybrid work has the potential to transform the way we work for the better. But it requires a fundamental shift in mindset, both for companies and individuals. It's about embracing flexibility, building trust, and finding new ways to connect and collaborate. And ultimately, it's about creating a work environment that supports both productivity and well-being, regardless of location.
It sounds like hybrid work is not just a trend, it's a whole new way of thinking about work. It's exciting to see how this will continue to evolve in the years to come.
It certainly is. And for anyone listening who's thinking about making the transition to hybrid work, I encourage you to do your research, talk to your team, and most importantly, be open to experimenting and finding what works best for you.
That's great advice. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into hybrid working. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep. The